Storms are a part of life that we all face at one time or another. Not every day is perfect, and there are moments when we, as humans, are faced with troubles or weaknesses, attacks, difficult circumstances. In the physical, the storm can bring howling winds that whistle, or waves that roar and rage. The thunder cracks with a terrifying sound, and when the sky lights up with lightning, it can be startling at times. Like a violent storm in our outside world, our inner world can go through extreme weather changes too. Winds of threatening situations can squeal like a tornado ripping over the land, and the waves can beat us up emotionally of worrisome things that could be done or fearful outcomes happening. It is uncomfortable to go through a storm in the spiritual realm because sometimes the threats that come against us could cause devastating results. And sometimes we are affected by the storms that other people have in their lives that they have welcomed through their own negative agreements and bad thoughts. One thing I've noticed is a storm often rages just before a big blessing shows up. And it can come just before we are promoted into a higher place or before something wonderful happens. Almost every time before I saw a fulfilled promise, there was always an opposing storm that would come against me to try to knock me off of my feet and cause me to lose focus. They come like winds howling of bad things that could come as the rain of other threatening situations came against me all at the same time. There were all situations that were piling up, and it can be overwhelming to bear. The fears of the situations going wrong can be too much to handle. When I was going through storms, I knew that I had to release the weight of the storm into God's hands to take over, because it was too big for me. It's like a storm in the physical realm. It's too powerful. I need to give it to God to bring peace to that storm. And I have a really unusual way of unloading my worries to God, because I need to feel the release that comes when it is completely laid down. And I know I'm no longer carrying that burden. When I just mentally or verbally give God my worries or fears, it's not enough for me personally. I need to do something. I need to mix movement with the release. I need to do something symbolically. And it's just where I'm at, and God understands. For me, I need to type out what I want to give to God. And I guess maybe that's the writer at heart inside of myself. But I feel a release when I type my burdens to God on the computer, because what I've been carrying on in my mind is transferred to another vessel, the computer. And I like to use the computer because after I have felt the full release of the fears, then I delete what I wrote as a way of letting go of those fears completely. The weird thing that I do is I use a secret language that I made with God to tell him my fears so that I can be cryptic from anyone reading those things. Because we don't ever want to come into agreement with fears. And fears need to be isolated, or they can spread like a virus. So I always make sure that after I give my fears to God, that I release every trace of them, as though they never existed at all. And sometimes I do this sloppy, drunk kind of release. And I don't actually get drunk, but I close my eyes and I type out the pain that I'm experiencing to God. And I can't type good with my eyes closed, so the words don't end up being readable. They're just like jumbled letters. But God, He knows my heart and He receives it all. I call it a sloppy drunk prayer because usually I have tears pouring out of my eyes as I'm typing, and the words fall out so fast that they're all out of order. This kind is reserved for the worst kind of grief, the biggest storms, and the most agonizing pain from the fears of all the bad outcomes that may be blowing like tornadoes outside. The beauty is what happens after there is a full release. It's like the storm suddenly clears and a rainbow spills through the air. At the time I release that storm to God, I have peace, and I know that God has heard my prayers and sorrows. There is something wonderful that happens when we get to the point of a release into peace. Hannah had that kind of lamenting prayer when she was so troubled with anguish in her soul when she wanted a baby. Eli thought she was drunk because she was weeping uncontrollably as she laid her pain before God. But to me, it was the most intimate, deepest level of faith that someone can have. It is beautiful because she felt the release of peace. After the weight of her burdens were transferred over to God, she arose happy and at peace because she knew God heard her. And she trusted that God accepted her prayer. God granted Hannah's petitions, and that is how we know that she transferred the weight of her agony over to God. God calmed the storm as soon as there was a release, and the release brought the peace that she needed to move forward. If you find yourself in a storm, do whatever it takes to find the release that brings peace. Whether you need to write it, record it, speak it, think it, whichever works for you. Just give the weight of your storm to God, and He will uphold you and care for every detail with the deepest concern. It is after the release that the miracle happens. It is after the release that the peace calms the storm and God's love quiets it to a whisper. And that is the very best comfort of all. It is the release that brings peace and fulfillment. It is in letting go that causes everything to change and the rainbow show up with full beauty. Plus, it's the best feeling in the world to have peace. Place your storm into God's hands and watch how He calms the storm to a whisper to comfort you with His ever-present love. Remember, there is always beauty after the storm, and the sun will shine again. The storm is just a passing through irritation, but the love that God promised, that's what will remain. I love you. This is Danette from Diamonds from the Dust. Come see me at diamondsfromthedust.com. God bless you.